Hello and welcome. The title of today's talk is Banksters, the Lords of Disaster. Banksters, the Lords of Disaster. And I'll be drawing from the book Tragedy and Hope by Carol Quigley, Professor Carol Quigley. And what I've learned recently from watching Jay Dyer, he is probably a luminary in our times and an advanced insight into all the shadowy governments of banksters and banking elite. But really, he draws a lot from this book, Tragedy and Hope. It's a 1,300-page tome. But getting into my talk will be a more tailored, specific insight into how the banksters control, what is the mechanism by which banksters control us. And it'll be called Banksters, the Lords of Disaster. The thesis, without further delay, the thesis is that the 300 men, apropos Walter Rathenau in 1909 wrote that a group of 300 men controlled the continent, and they all knew each other and they chose their successors. So the thesis is the 300 men who control the continent and the Anglo-American establishment, and especially the top banksters, and I'm not making a mistake when I say that, I say banksters like gangsters, only a bankster. Rothschild, Rockefeller, Morgan, and the successor, you know these names, Rothschild, Rockefeller, and J.P. Morgan, you know these names. The top banksters and their successors of the major banking houses. There's about a dozen or so banking houses that you may or may not know the name of. A dozen or so banking houses going back 300 years. They control the lives and destinies of every person on the planet and are the authors of the disasters and hardships besetting the West. And the best way that I've come to conceive of this is they control us through money and central banking, and to think about it, to meditate on it, to think about it. Think about arch villains. Think about that. We know the arch villains in other countries of history. We know Stalin was the arch communist villain. Lenin was the arch communist villain. Mao was the arch communist villain. Hitler was the arch fascist villain. Mussolini was the arch fascist villain. These arch fascists and communists, we know them. We know their names. But what is lesser known is the villains in our own Anglo-American, Canadian, British, Anglo-American societies. And whereas there's communist arch-villains and fascist arch-villains, in our case there are arch-financial capitalist villains, arch-villains as financial capitalists. And that's really what they are, is financial capitalists, and they control everything through finance and money, as I'll get into. And they've successfully navigated through world wars and the economic collapse, many of which they partially caused by their short-sighted and long-term vision. Don't make no mistake about it, this is done on purpose. Crises, never let a good crisis go to waste, right? That's what the banksters have internalized. Point one, so just think about it as the arch villains. We know the arch villains of communists, and we know the arch villains of fascists. The arch villains of capitalists are the financial capitalists like Morgan, J.P. Morgan, Rothschild from back 30 years ago, and Rockefeller, the Rockefeller dynasty, the Rothschild dynasty, and whoever succeeds. I don't know what the Morgan dynasty is like. I don't know if it exists, I don't know if it still exists, but it definitely did exist at one time, and probably does today too. Point one, in the past, even during the gold standard, the banksters, Rothschilds, Morgans controlled government debts and money borrowing. So as Jay Dyer says, for those of you who think that going back to the gold standard would somehow erase all the damage and all the control and all the evil in the world, going back to the gold standard, one, we can't ever go back to the gold standard because it doesn't work. It's too simple a mechanism. It's not sophisticated enough a mechanism to control world finance. And second, what makes you think that they wouldn't just immediately control gold? If they were transitioning back to gold, they would just control gold then, like they did in the past. They controlled gold. The financial capitalists controlled gold reserves in the past, invented fractional banking where they could lend out in deposits and debts more than what they had in gold reserves, and they controlled the gold reserves, and they couldn't hold on to gold, and they decided to transition off of gold. But they controlled gold before, and they controlled whatever comes after gold. They control the US dollar now. But before, back in history, and even today, it just stands for today too, knowing the past helps you understand the present. In the past, the banks controlled government debts, first and foremost, treasury bonds, the like, government bonds, and money borrowing. They controlled government debts and money. They were very concerned with foreign exchange rates and government policy and government action and government debts. They wanted the governments to pay their debts because the debts were owed to the banksters. They wanted to control what conflicts took place, and they wanted to control money supply, and they control all of this. As I'll get into, the theme is they control us through money. Whatever kind of currency you're talking about, I think crypto is a rebellion against this. Whether it's, I don't think it's going to work though. But they controlled the U.S. dollar, and before they controlled the gold. They controlled the gold, now they control the U.S. dollar, and they're probably moving towards a centralized digital currency, which they will control that too. Point two. Today they run inflation out of asset. Today the banksters run inflation of asset classes and are concerned for total control over your incomes, properties. They control government financing and work through currencies which they control, including the US dollar, which they structure to suit their interests through central banking. This is just so apparent. The more that you watch, glean from men like Steve Bannon, the more that you watch right-wing populist bankers, you realize that the central bank, and you read a book like The Lords of Easy Money that I have up there, The Lords of Easy Money, where quantitative easing starting in Obama's years in 2014, after the financial collapse of 2008, 2009, they printed as much money as they could. And this would be contrary to banker interest, because bankers want to make money valuable, they want to hold on to the value of money. But in this case, they own the assets now rather than just the money. And so they cause inflation in their asset classes, their stocks, bonds, and real estate goes up and up and up. And the top 1% get richer and richer. And this is the biggest windfall, the biggest concentration of wealth in the history of America. And just a side note is that when you see a billionaire like Elon Musk was valued at over $200 billion, Jeff Bezos was over $100 billion, all these billionaires, these fortunes that are supposed to be the richest men in the world are nothing compared to what the banking houses control. They control trillions of dollars. And even though the budget is many trillions of dollars, to control an actual capital of multiple trillions of dollars, you can buy off professors, you buy off the apparatus, as I could get into other talks, as Jay Dyer's gotten into extensively. But it's kind of beyond the scope of this talk, is that the institutions they set up, from Tavistock Institute to the Royal Institute of National Relations, to the Council of Foreign Relations, to the Trilateral Commission, to the International Settlement of Banking, International Bank of Settlements in Switzerland. They set up the whole institutes and organization, and they buy up, they co-opt professors and able managers of banks and financiers and professors and mouthpieces like Klaus Schwab. All these men are bought and paid for by the multiple trillions of dollars of legacy of the banking houses, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, Morgan, the major bank houses, a dozen or so banking houses from 100 years ago. But today they control everything through currency, through money. Money is what they control. When you control money, you control the world, right? When you control, especially in a financial capitalist society, or even a plurality economy, as Quigley calls it now today, a plurality economy. Even in the plurality economy, if you control the currency, it's still capitalism. You control the currency, you control the world. And that's what they do. In the last 10 years, they've run up their asset classes for printing money. And now, by any way they cut the pie, they get the major slice. They win, right? If there's inflation, their assets go up. If the interest rates go up and inflation goes down, then the value of their money goes up. So any way you cut it, they win. They control the cash and the assets. Point three, the squeeze is on. Housing is ridiculous, especially here in Canada. Housing is ridiculous. Income tax is regressive. The banksters are making out like bandits. This is the final point. The squeeze is on. In Canada, to buy a small, I think 750 square foot condo or apartment to own in a city that's not even in Toronto, the major city, but it's in one of the satellite cities, is about $600,000 Canadian, and the Canadian dollar is about only a third less than the US dollar. So it's about, the Canadian dollar is about 2/3 the US dollar, and it's about $400,000 US to get a small living space in a satellite city of Toronto in Ontario today. They're just squeezing. They don't want us to own any houses, like they said that in the globalist propaganda. They said by 2030 you own nothing and be happy about it. That's why I buy books. So I have a physical copy that will keep my mind active, and I have a physical claim to freedom through the books, freedom through the books, freedom through reading, freedom through the books. But they don't want us to own any houses. And income tax is regressive. So if you're a wage earner, this is a big con that they play on you, right? And don't think that they want your income tax to be high so they can get a good government revenue. That's not why. They want your income tax high so that they can keep you subdued and poor and broken and broke. They do it to break you. They don't do it to be nice and give you health care and give you government. They don't care about that. They don't care about giving you government services. They care about making it so that you have no economic utility or power whatsoever. That's what regressive income tax is all about. It's about crushing the lower and middle classes. How is it? Look at how they make money. Like Warren Buffett says, he pays less taxes than his secretary. You can make the apologist argument that that's good for the economy, but is it really good for the lower middle classes? I think not. Why do they tax if it's so important to keep their taxes low? Why isn't it important to keep our taxes low to stimulate demand? See, it all works in their favor. The income tax is regressive to crush you, to break you. It's not the government to give you health care and generate government revenues. It's to break you. They're making out like bandits. The squeeze is on. The housing, the asset classes are going up, up, and up. Nobody can own anything. Millennials and younger cannot own anything. Our incomes are crushed, and there's very few breakaway cases of wealth in our age group, in our society. So with this, I leave you. This is called the Banksters, the Lords of Disaster. Every economic disaster from the Great Depression to the 2008 recession to the 1970s OPEC crisis, to the world wars, to the Cold War was all engineered by the arch capitalists. We have arch capitalists, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, Morgan, J.P. Morgan. That is the arch villains that control our society, and they control the money. When they control the money, they control society, they control the asset classes, they control money and assets. And they control the central banks that either deflate or inflate currency or raise interest rates. And either way, they win. If inflation goes up, their assets go up. If interest rates go up, their value of their money goes up. And then you as a wage earner are taxed regressively to extract and break your economic position. So with this, I leave you my peace. I give you God bless and take care. More talks to come in the future. Amen. Bye-bye.